Action.
All right, thank you, Ken. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, January 19th Board of Adjustment meeting. Roll call, please.
Hanson. Here. McGuire.
Here.
Shriver.
Here.
Stein.
Here.
Albertson. Here. Stonebarger, Dolly, and Arnold are absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the January 5th, 2017 minutes. Can I get a motion in a second? Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr. Stein. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is Betty Aronzy and Dakota Land Federal Credit Union, permit number 17165, seeking a variance for the property at 1101 9th Avenue Southeast in the C3 Highway Commercial District.
All right, thank you. Application was submitted requesting to construct a non-conforming 5,062 square foot commercial building with a 944 square foot drive-through canopy and approximately 27,568 square feet parcel located in the C3 Highway Commercial District. Said structure to be constructed 8 feet from the side north property line where 20-foot setback is required and 15 feet from the front west property line where 40 feet is required. This is a redevelopment project. The existing structure is to be raised and the proposed commercial building is to be a financial institution which is permitted use in the C3 Highway Commercial District. The property is in the floodway. See it, for the buildable area approved by FEMA. Staff confused. Oh, even with FEMA, no. In addition to the redevelopment of this property with a non-conforming structure, the submitted site plan does not meet the minimum ordinance requirements for landscape and parking lot. I'm not going to go all through all those because this is kind of a peculiar item, and the main things that we need to concentrate on with you guys is to allow or consider the setbacks this way and this way. So even when you do your approval tonight, I'm going to be asking for another kind of a blanket open thing with required any screening requirements, any landscape requirements, everything else, because this is in the floodway. We have to make sure we meet the floodway FEMA requirements with that in conjunction. So that'll go for screening, trees, curb and gutter, and those other items. So.
And in the floodway, Ken, for those that don't know, in the floodway, no building can be put in the floodway. Not elevated or unelevated, correct?
Correct, but and Shane might have to jump in and correct me on this, but they have already contacted FEMA, so they're going to take out a bigger footprint and put in a lesser footprint, so they're actually going to be improving that amount of restrictions that'll be in the area. The actual building elevation of this area and what they're going on to is above the floodway base flood elevation requirement, and but all those final things still need to be put together, and no permit even with your approval tonight, if you get approval tonight.
Can you put the floodway on the map there? Can you overlay it?
So the area shown in yellow is the actual floodway. So because of the FEMA restrictions, then we're just asking you just to allow staff to make sure that.
That's the floodway, right? The yellow is the floodway.
Yep.
Where we do not allow any building.
Okay, we'll back up a couple
Okay.
steps. So they met with staff and we reviewed that, and what they had done before they met with us was have a surveyor go out and verify elevations around the existing Goodyear property. And that elevation work showed that the majority of the Goodyear property and building structure is technically outside of the floodway at this point based on elevation. The floodway is a model that FEMA created and so doesn't recognize the local elevations per se.
Right, got it. So if this was based on elevation, it wouldn't all be yellow.
Correct. So what they've done now then is they're working with FEMA, and they're reducing the footprint of the new building's going to be a much greater reduced footprint than the existing structure. So our recommendation was that they work with FEMA, and if they could get all the FEMA approvals, that this building would be allowable to be built within the portion of the Goodyear property that should be out of the floodway based on elevation. Correct. So
they'll actually be going for a CLOMA, conditional letter of a map amendment to say that area is out.
Correct. So they're in the process of doing all that, and so it's really final approval will be hanging on FEMA, and then the only other consideration here, which isn't really a concern of the Board of Adjustment is they're working on their final approval for their driveway entrance from the DOT. And the DOT just wants them to retain their existing driveway, and I think they can make that work and everybody will be happy, so.
My question is that, with the DOT, you know, they're gonna be widening out the highway. So in conjunction of what these guys wanna do here with landscaping and so forth, is that gonna, do we need something from the DOT to say how much they're actually really gonna take in 2019?
Right, so the DOT, that's why the DOT is recommending that the existing driveway stay as is with their footprint, and then, because they're gonna come back and improve it, so that's why they're recommending that the driveway entrance stay where it is and how it is at this time. And then they can improve everything on the interior side of that lot, and I can't speak for the DOT, but I believe this might be in an area where they're requiring up to 5 feet of additional right-of-way anyway, but.
On each side of the highway?
Yep.
And that's why we're asking for the latitude to make a determination of whether landscaping, trees, or screening or anything can even be put in at all. And just kind of be a blanket, okay, you guys make sure that works with FEMA and we're good.
So Ken, I have a question. If most of the existing buildings are actually by elevation out of the floodway, why can't it be slid back 15 feet so it meets that 11th Street setback?
Well, to allow for the parking as they proposed and everything else on there, and actually, within our ordinance, that side is in line with these other existing buildings too, and it could already be allowed to be within that area anyway, because it's already just matching the existing structures to the north of it. You know, they're also asking for the alley, but to make the parking work along the easterly side of it, to have a driveway and the parking and everything else in there, it really does need to be where it's placed.
This property's been in front of the board a couple different times previously, has it not?
Not since I've been here, not in the last 12, 13
Really?
years.
I thought. Okay, I thought they were planning on doing some remodeling in the building and.
The place right next to them had come before us a couple of
maybe
years.
that's what I'm thinking of.
Gas place, whatever, the welding shop, whatever it was. They were looking at trying to do a few things within
Okay.
the area.
That's what I'm probably.
And since you brought up AOX, because AOX has that lot right behind it,
Correct.
and they can't build on it because it's in the floodway. But
Correct.
these guys can build on this one in the floodway because it's by elevation, it's not in the floodway?
But they're having to get approval from.
Correct, through that.
FEMA.
Can they fill that lot back there?
Fill it? No.
Can't fill to make that lot a buildable lot.
Correct.
Nope, not in the floodway.
But what if it's
These
already
guys
filled and
won't
it's
be
already there? It
filling the
doesn't matter.
elevation of what they already have there.
Because it's already there. They're just modifying what's already there, so it has a different set of
Now, if I'm
rules.
speaking wrong, Shane, please jump in.
Well, that's my understanding, is that you can't fill to bring something out of the floodway, but if it already existed out of the floodway, I mean, the floodway is a model, and if you can prove that the model is wrong, that gives you some latitude.
So is there anything that we're gonna do tonight that holds them up if we don't take action? Does this hold them up as far as the floodway or
If you don't grant the variance to the alley and to the north and to the east, it stops the project.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Is this building going to be closer to the alley than the existing building?
No, it's gonna be further away.
So we'll actually move property further away from the alley. On the 15-foot side, it's in line with everything down
We'll
there.
stay in line there, and then on the 212 side, my gosh, we're gonna gain great guns there, because that's gonna be a whole parking lot, so that corner will really open up there, make better visibility around there.
And go over the screening one more time, because there's
Well,
residences behind it, right?
Right, so by ordinance, there should be some kind of screening here, but I'm not,
Your request is to give you the latitude to handle that internally?
right, if it's allowed by FEMA to add the screening, then we'll put the screening in. If FEMA says no, that's in the floodway, and that's in the other part, and it's gonna create an obstruction, then no, we're not gonna require them to do that. That's gonna be the same thing with the possibility of a tree here. They might say the same thing, no tree.
So if we grant the variance, it still has to abide by all the FEMA regulations,
Absolutely,
which that's
yeah.
a different
Your granting
that's
the
a
variance
different
is not
body.
granting the building permit in this particular place. Your variance is just granting those two parameters to be met, and we still have to make sure that all the FEMA requirements, all the DOT requirements are met
And that's
before permit
That's-
issuance.
right, and that's not our job to do that in a
Correct,
case like
yeah.
that. So,
We don't want to drag you down with all that stuff, but
all right.
you need to know there's got to be a little latitude for us to work within
Okay.
that.
With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit.
Now, Jason did receive an email from one party. I don't know if they're here or not, but that was,
I saw that it was from a person in town that said, why would you grant such a large variance? That's
Yeah.
25-foot variance on one side and I didn't see what the 12-foot on the other side.
It was Mr. Hesh,
yeah.
and I think he was wondering if we were setting a bad precedence. I can't say anything anymore. Because I believe their bank asked for a variance similar to that, and they were turned down.
I'm not familiar with the property he's working with, so.
Yeah, who knows, there could have been any number of variables that came into play as far as that previous variance.
The one thing I always like to say too is we have 8 members on this board. It takes five yeses regardless of the attendance. So it does require all 5 members that are here today to vote yes for the variance to move forward. At any time, if the applicant would like to table the motion until the next meeting, they can do that also, for the record.
Here.
But from a variance wide, my biggest concern was 11th Street. That's a 20, what did I write down, 20 or 25-foot variance, but they are in line with the
Yep,
adjacent
and to
structures.
that degree, if that was the only issue, we wouldn't even be here.
Okay. And on the 8-foot side, we actually have less encroachment there than we did before.
Correct.
Is the public still open? I'd like to say a couple words if I may. It's interesting to see this happen on this corner because if you look further down into our CIP, which is about 3 or 4 years within the city, we're looking at expanding 11th Street to carry right down to Jensen Avenue, which this will be an attractive spot for that road. So I'm totally in favor of this, just so you know that.
My name is Dan Company.
Come up here, you gotta speak in the microphone. So
All right. My name is Dan Cumby, and I'm the president of Dakota Land Federal Credit Union. We have 9 branches across eastern South Dakota, and we have already applied and received our LOMA from FEMA, and it's a meets and bounds, meaning the current footprint is like, in all essence, a dam of that creek, and it's Roby Creek. Just the history on Roby Creek, we went with or found out in that LOMA process that Roby Creek in 1905, I think, was filled in through here. And there's a big 6-foot culvert that comes under 11th Street. And so essentially the creek has been moved from a surface creek to underground. However, it can still flood. And so if it ever were to flood and overrun that culvert, it's going to spread out quite a bit because that is pretty flat in that area. And so the engineer out of Omaha, he said that really this floodway is fictional. It really doesn't exist anymore, and it's still there because FEMA had to put it somewhere. And if they moved it and widened it or done anything, it would cause a lot of hardship on a lot of other properties up and down 11th Street. So they just left it where it is, and so with that in mind, we then applied, and it took about 4 months to get a LOMA from FEMA. And essentially, it's the outline of the building and any solid concrete that was poured. Almost all of it, not quite all of it, was mapped out. And there's a really detailed map that LOMA has, or this LOMA letter of map adjustment has taken out of the floodway or out of the flood zone. It still leaves a nice area right through the center, and actually it reduces the amount of damming, so to speak, because really in a floodway you don't want to back the water up, and create problems for your neighbors upstream. You want to let that water flow through, and our plan will do that. But in that Loma, we had to stay approximately 80 feet from the east border. That's kind of the setback that Loma has in stone, approximately 80 feet. And so we're going to be right up to the edge of that, and with our structure with the 15-foot setback, that's what we need, because FEMA kind of trumps everybody with their rules. We have 80-foot, essentially an 80-foot setback from the east line and 15-foot from the west side, and then that just leaves about a couple feet, margin of error to build a structure in there. If you're stuck with a 40-foot setback, you could put a mobile home in there pretty much, and it would have to be skinny, and because you could not go to the west. And I can just show you a little bit.
Here's a pointer.
Okay. So,
No, you use the mouse.
okay, that'll work. Where did it go? So the meets and bounds is the structure, and it does come over here, but then it comes way back, and then it just kind of follows a line. There's a little piece of concrete out here, and then I think it comes back, and it comes, the outline of the building, essentially. And then all of this area, there's concrete over here too, so I think it's out over here. But this area from somewhere right in here all the way over is all still in the floodway, and you're not allowed to build in that area.
Thank you. Any other questions for me, guys? Anyone else speak in the open? Seeing none, I'll close the public the public hearing. Ask for a motion and a second for further discussion.
I'd make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Albertson, second by Mr. McGuire. Any other discussion on any questions?
Sounds like they've got it cleared already, so we're just kind of.
My concern was the 11th Street. Shane, one quick question on 11th Street. Is that someday may extend through there? What's the width of that street? That's a collector street there?
Can you measure it on your
And his
sheet?
setback off the actual street? We're not gonna put a building there and then need to widen that street, are we?
Well, the street will be,
It suffices for what?
and
it is.
everything will be located within the existing right-of-way,
Right,
so.
And the
we're
existing
okay.
right-of-way is 80 foot.
So it's,
yeah.
we had an 80-foot right of way
Right,
there.
right, so we don't need to, we have adequate right-of-way, we're
Okay.
not gonna impose on it with that, so.
So it's a 15-foot setback, but visually it seems much more than that because of that excessive right of way. All right, that's the only question I had. Any other questions for discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And Ken, in that motion is that it's your discretion on all
Okay.
that screening.
Thank you.
That was assumed in there as we talked about it in the discussion, and
Yeah, the screening, the
we
landscaping.
normally would have done it right away, but because it's FEMA related, and
Yep.
as we said, they'll trump everything else. Any old business? Can I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Albertson, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.